The Galactic Confederation had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 400 different species lived under its protection, spread across 9 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They had witnessed the birth and death of stars. They believed they knew everything worth knowing. They were wrong. When humanity's first, faster-than-light ship appeared at the edge of Confederation space in the year 2247, the response was nothing more than mild curiosity. Another primitive species had discovered basic space travel. It happened every few centuries. Nothing special. Ambassador Vethanok of the Cerelian Collective was given the task of meeting these new creatures. The Cerelians were one of the oldest species in the Confederation. Their civilization was 6,000 years older than most others. Vethanok himself had welcomed 37 different species into the galactic community. Humans would simply be number 38 on his list. The meeting took place aboard Vethanok's personal diplomatic ship. The human vessel, a small craft called the Endurance, looked like a child's toy compared to the elegant Cerelian cruiser. Captain Daniel Briggs led the human delegation, accompanied by Commander Lisa Moore and their science officer, Dr. Kevin Walsh. Vethanok studied the humans with his 4 compound eyes. They were soft creatures made of carbon and water. They breathed oxygen and needed to eat organic matter to survive. Their bodies were fragile, their lifespans short. Nothing about them seemed remarkable in any way. "We welcome humanity to the galactic community," Vethanok said through the translation device that converted his words into human language. "You will find the Confederation to be generous teachers. In time, perhaps after a few centuries of learning, you may be granted limited membership." Captain Briggs looked at Commander Moore. Something passed between them. But Vethanok did not understand human facial expressions well enough to read it. "We appreciate the welcome, Ambassador," Briggs said. "We are eager to learn about your defensive technologies. Our region of space has been difficult to survive in." Vethanok made a gesture that meant dismissal among his people. "You do not need to worry about defense anymore. The Confederation maintains peace through superior technology. No species would be foolish enough to challenge us. You are safe now." With respect, Dr. Walsh spoke up, "We have developed some defensive systems of our own. We use kinetic acceleration weapons. We call them railguns." The translation device processed the term and explained what it meant. Vethanok felt something close to amusement. These creatures were even more primitive than he had thought. "Kinetic weapons?" he said. "You mean you fire solid objects at your enemies? How very old-fashioned." The Confederation stopped using such crude technology thousands of years ago. Energy shields make them completely useless. A focused plasma beam or a quantum disruptor is far more effective than throwing rocks. Commander Moore leaned forward in her seat. "Our railguns accelerate tungsten projectiles to approximately 15% of the speed of light. The energy transfer when they hit a target is, I am sure it is very impressive for a species at your stage of development," Vethanok interrupted. He was growing bored with this conversation. "But I promise you, such weapons would do nothing against even our most basic shields. Perhaps we can arrange a demonstration of proper military technology for your education." The humans said nothing more about their weapons. They completed the formal diplomatic procedures and returned to their small ship. 3 days later, Vethanok filed his official report on humanity with the Confederation Council. He described them as a young species that showed some promise but was technologically immature. He noted their strange attachment to kinetic weapons as an amusing detail, a leftover from their violent, evolutionary past that they would eventually outgrow as they became more civilized. The Council read the report, added it to their records, and forgot about it. Over the next 5 years, humanity slowly expanded into Confederation space. They built 12 new colonies on different worlds. They established trade agreements with several species. They asked many questions about shield technology and power generation and faster-than-light communication. They seemed eager to learn, and they kept building railguns. Admiral Patricia Cho commanded Earth's United Defense Force. She personally supervised the construction of humanity's first true warship at the orbital shipyards above Earth. Unlike the converted exploration vessels that made up most of humanity's early fleet, This new ship was designed from the beginning for only one purpose: war. They named it the Ironclad. The Ironclad carried 4 main railgun batteries on its top surface. Each battery could fire a tungsten slug weighing 1 ton at 22% of the speed of light. 12 smaller railgun turrets provided defense against missiles and small craft. The ship carried no plasma weapons, no energy beams, no quantum disruptors. Only our AILGUNS. When Confederation trade representatives visited Earth's shipyards and saw the Ironclad, they were confused and somewhat embarrassed for the humans. "You understand this vessel would be destroyed in moments by any Confederation warship?" asked Trade Representative Mikkel of the Vorthani hegemony. "Your kinetic weapons cannot penetrate standard shielding. This is established science." Admiral Cho smiled politely. "We prefer to be prepared for any situation. But the power requirements make kinetic acceleration completely impractical," Mikkel insisted. "A single plasma lance achieves the same destructive effect with a tiny fraction of the energy cost. Your approach makes no sense. We have found that kinetic weapons have certain advantages in specific situations," Cho replied. "The physics of momentum transfer can be quite surprising." Mikkel included this conversation in his trade report. He suggested that human stubbornness about kinetic weapons was a sign of cultural immaturity. Young species often clung to inferior technologies because of pride. They would learn better eventually. Humanity did continue to learn. Their scientists studied Confederation shields in great detail. They asked endless questions about how the shields worked. They ran countless computer simulations. Their engineers made improvements to their railgun designs, increasing projectile speed and reducing power requirements. By the year 2255, humanity possessed 47 warships. Every single one was armed with kinetic weapons. The Confederation found this slightly embarrassing. It was like watching a child insist on bringing a wooden sword to a fight against plasma rifles. Humans were clearly intelligent enough to understand that their weapons were obsolete. Why did they refuse to accept reality? Some junior diplomats suggested that perhaps the humans knew something the Confederation did not. Perhaps there was a reason they were so committed to kinetic technology. Perhaps someone should investigate their claims more seriously. These suggestions were dismissed as foolish. The Confederation had 12,000 years of military experience. Humans had barely left their home planet. The idea that primitives could teach anything to the galactic community was laughable. The warnings continued. Human military officers explained the mathematics of relativistic kinetic impact. They showed calculations proving that sufficient mass at sufficient velocity could overwhelm any energy-based shield. They offered to share technical data. No one listened. The galaxy had made up its mind about humanity. They were young. They were primitive. Their weapons were obsolete relics of a violent past. They would learn better eventually. Once they matured as a species, the Confederation filed away the warnings and continued ignoring them. This would prove to be the worst mistake in galactic history. The Kethver were not members of the Galactic Confederation. They lived on the outer edges of known space, a violent species that had refused to join the galactic community. Instead, they survived through piracy and raiding, attacking colonies and stealing resources whenever they thought they could get away with it. For 3,000 years, the Confederation had tolerated them as a minor problem. Their attacks were too rare and their territory too remote to be worth the effort of destroying them completely. They were pests, nothing more. In the year 2256, the Kethver decided to try something new. A Kethver battle fleet of 60 warships suddenly appeared near a human colony called New Providence. The colony was small, with barely 50,000 people living there. Most of them were farmers and their families. The colony had no military ships. Only a single orbital defense platform with a few basic weapons. The Kethver destroyed the platform in their first attack. Their troops began landing on the surface within an hour. Captain Samuel Hayes of the human frigate Relentless was 3 star systems away when the emergency signal reached him. His ship was one of the newer designs, carrying 6 railgun batteries and a crew of 200. Against 60 Kethver warships, he should have had no chance at all. Hayes arrived at New Providence 14 hours after the invasion started. The HFY fleet was in orbit around the planet, their soldiers already controlling the main population centers on the surface. About 12,000 colonists had been killed or captured. The HFY commander was a scarred old warrior named Thrakvalum. He was amused when his sensors detected the single human ship approaching. "One ship?" he barked at his officers. "The humans send one ship to stop us." His tactical officer studied the sensor readings carefully. Unknown ship design, see? Almander, approximately frigate class. I am detecting strange weapon signatures. They appear to be kinetic acceleration systems. Thrakval's mandibles clicked together in confusion. Kinetic weapons? Do they not have energy weapons like everyone else? No, Commander. All weapon signatures are kinetic accelerators. They appear to be throwing solid objects. The HFY fleet had shields. They were not as advanced as Confederation shields, but they worked well enough. Energy weapons would need a long time of continuous fire to break through them. Kinetic weapons were considered so old and useless that HFY battle tactics did not even consider them a threat. This was about to become a very serious problem, Captain. Hayes opened communications with the HFY fleet. HFY forces, this is the United Earth vessel Relentless. You have attacked a human colony and killed human citizens. You have 1 hour to remove your troops, release all prisoners, and leave this system. If you do not, I will destroy your fleet. Thrakvalum stared at his communication screen in disbelief. Then he started laughing. His officers laughed with him. "One ship threatens 60? Thrakvalum replied, still laughing. "Human, you are either very brave or completely insane. We will capture your vessel and add your crew to our slaves. Prepare to be boarded." He ended the communication and ordered his fleet to attack. The HFY ships accelerated toward the Relentless in a standard attack formation. Their plasma weapons powered up. Their shield generators hummed at full strength. They were professional raiders who had attacked dozens of colonies across the outer territories. This would be easy. At a distance of 800,000 kilometers, Captain Hayes gave the order, "All batteries, fire." 6 railgun batteries fired at the same moment. 12 tungsten slugs, each weighing about 500 kilograms, accelerated down magnetic rails until they reached 20% of the speed of light. They crossed the distance to the HFY fleet in less than 3 seconds. HFY shields were designed to stop energy, plasma, lasers, particle beams. They absorbed incoming energy and converted it into harmless heat and radiation. This was clever, efficient, and had been the standard approach to defense for thousands of years. But a tungsten slug traveling at 60,000 kilometers per second is not energy. It is mass. It is momentum. It is physics at its most brutal and unstoppable. The first slug hit the HFY cruiser Vengeful Claw. The shield flickered. Confused by an attack it was not designed to stop. The slug punched through the shield like a needle through paper. It continued through the front sections of the ship, through the reactor compartment, through the rear sections, and out the other side, leaving a trail of explosions and escaping air. The Vengeful Claw broke into pieces 3 seconds later. 11 other ships suffered the same fate. Some were destroyed immediately. Others were crippled, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space, as holes in the hull spread faster than emergency systems could seal them. Volume watched in horror as 20% of his fleet disappeared in the opening moment of the battle. "What kind of weapon is this?" he whispered. "Kinetic acceleration, Commander," his tactical officer reported. His voice was shaking badly. "They are firing solid metal projectiles at relativistic speeds. Our shields cannot stop them. Our shields were never designed to stop them." Another wave of projectiles struck. 8 more ships died. The Relentless kept firing. Her railgun batteries recycled every 12 seconds, ready to fire again. Each wave of projectiles was death. Each tungsten slug was unstoppable. The HFY shields might as well have been made of nothing. Thrakvalum ordered a retreat. His remaining ships turned around and accelerated toward the edge of the system, desperate to escape into hyperspace before another volley could hit them. They almost made it. Captain Hayes followed them. His smaller ship was faster and more maneuverable than the larger HFY cruisers. He picked them off one by one, precise shots to their engine sections that left ships tumbling dead in space. Of the 60 vessels that had attacked New Providence, only 11 managed to escape. The entire battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, Captain Hayes sent a message to Earth Command, New Providence secured, enemy fleet destroyed, requesting support ships for rescue operations and salvage. The response came 3 hours later, along with a dozen ships and thousands of questions news. The battle spread through the Confederation faster than light could travel. A single human frigate had destroyed 49 warships using kinetic weapons. The tactical implications were enormous. Military strategists across the galaxy began reconsidering everything they thought they knew about warfare. But old beliefs are stubborn things. The HFY were primitive. Ambassador Vethanok argued before the Confederation Council. Their shields were generations behind current technology. This battle proves nothing about the effectiveness of kinetic weapons against proper Confederation defenses. With respect, Ambassador, said the human representative, a calm diplomat named Dr. Rachel Martinez, the physics does not change based on who builds the shield. A large enough mass moving fast enough will overwhelm any energy dissipation system. It is simply mathematics. Human arrogance, said the Vorthane delegate with contempt. You win one battle against pirates and think you can threaten the Confederation itself. We are not threatening anyone, Dr. Martinez replied. We are simply asking that our military technology be taken seriously. We have shared the technical details of our weapons. Your own scientists can check the mathematics? The Council did order a study to be done. The study confirmed that human railguns could, in theory, penetrate Confederation shields if the projectiles moved fast enough. But the study also said that such speeds would require massive amounts of power, making the weapons impractical for real combat. The study was filed away and forgotten. Humanity kept building railguns. They kept improving the technology. By 2260, their warships could fire at 28% of light speed with a reload time of 8 seconds. The galaxy kept ignoring them. The price of that ignorance would be paid in blood. Correlation 7 was a research station. Floating in the darkness at the very edge of explored space, 3,000 scientists from 40 different species worked there on projects. Too dangerous or too secret for populated worlds, the station was protected by a Confederation battle group of 12 warships, all carrying the newest and most advanced shields available in the year 2262. Correlation 7 went silent. The emergency signal lasted only a few seconds before cutting off. The last words anyone heard mentioned an unknown threat. Ships appearing from a region of space that had been surveyed and declared empty 200 years earlier. The Confederation sent a response fleet immediately. 30 warships, including the massive flagship Eternal Dawn, arrived at Correlation 7's location for days after the last message. They found nothing but wreckage. The station was gone. The battle group was gone. 3,000 scientists and 4,000 naval personnel had vanished. The only evidence of what had happened was a single sensor buoy that had been knocked offline during the attack and had restarted itself afterward. The recordings on that buoy showed everything. Ships had appeared from the empty void. Hundreds of them. Their design was unknown, not matching anything in Confederation records. Their technology was clearly advanced. They had attacked without any warning, without any attempt to communicate, without any mercy. The battle group had fought back as hard as they could. Plasma weapons and quantum disruptors had fired at the unknown ships over and over again. Shields on the enemy vessels had glowed under the impacts, but had held firm. The Confederation ships had poured fire into their attackers for 18 minutes without destroying a single one. Then the unknown ships had returned fire. Their weapons were simple. Kinetic accelerators, massive railguns that fired dense metal projectiles at speeds that seemed impossible. The sensor buoy estimated the projectiles were moving at over 40% of the speed of light. Confederation shields collapsed in an instant. Ships that had served the fleet for centuries were turned into expanding clouds of debris in seconds. The entire battle group was destroyed without damaging a single enemy vessel. The Council called an emergency meeting. "We face a threat to our existence," declared High Admiral Vexter of the combined fleet. "These unknown attackers have kinetic weapons that make our defenses meaningless. We must develop countermeasures immediately." "What about the humans?" asked a junior delegate from the back of the chamber. "They have been developing kinetic weapons for years. Perhaps they could help us understand. We will not embarrass ourselves by asking primitives for help," Bethanok interrupted angrily. "The Confederation will develop its own solutions. We have resources these newcomers cannot even imagine." Dr. Martinez sat in the observer section, watching the debate. She had been warning them for years. Every human military officer who visited the Confederation had warned them. The physics was clear and simple. Energy shields could not stop kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. The mathematics did not lie, but pride was stronger than mathematics. Over the following months, the unknown attackers struck again and again. The Confederation eventually designated them as Species Unknown 117. Colony worlds fell to their assaults. Military outposts disappeared without survivors. The Ration gathered its greatest fleet, sent thousands of ships to fight the threat, watched helplessly as those ships were turned to wreckage. Every battle was the same. Confederation plasma weapons could not penetrate the enemy's shields. Enemy railguns destroyed Confederation ships with a single hit. The advantage was entirely one-sided. The death toll climbed higher and higher. Millions died, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. Entire worlds were depopulated. Species that had existed for thousands of years were reduced to scattered refugees. Humanity watched. Humanity waited. Humanity prepared. Admiral Patricia Cho had been promoted to fleet admiral in 2259. She now commanded humanity's entire military force. 238 warships, every single one armed with the kinetic weapons the galaxy had spent years laughing at. She gathered her senior officers in the war room of the heavy cruiser Defiant. "The Confederation still has not asked us for help," reported Captain Samuel Hayes. After his victory at New Providence, he had been promoted and now commanded a full battle group. "They are losing system after system, but they will not admit they need us." Pride, Admiral Cho said. "They would rather die than admit we were right." "With respect, Admiral," said Commander Lisa Moore. Now serving as Cho's chief of staff, they might get exactly that. "Our intelligence reports say Species Unknown 117 is advancing toward the core worlds. If they reach the Confederation capital, everything is over." Cho studied the holographic map floating above the table. Red symbols marked the enemy advance. Blue symbols marked Confederation defensive positions. The blue was retreating on every front, getting smaller every day. "How long until they reach human territory?" she asked. "At their current speed, about 18 months. But if the Confederation falls completely, we will have to face them alone. And we do not have enough ships for that." Cho nodded slowly. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had hoped it would not, but she had prepared for it anyway. "Then we do not let the Confederation fall," she said. "Prepare the fleet. We are going to war." "Council has not asked for our help," Hayes pointed out. "I'm not asking for their permission," Cho replied. "We are going to save these stubborn fools whether they want us to or not." The orders went out that same hour. 238 human warships began moving toward Confederation space. It was the largest military operation in human history. Every ship carried kinetic weapons. Every crew had trained for years to use them effectively. The Confederation did not know they were coming. Human ships moved through back routes and empty systems, avoiding Confederation patrols and observation posts. This was not because Cho feared interference. It was because she wanted to arrive at the right moment, at the right place to make the greatest impact. She studied the enemy advance carefully. She analyzed their tactics and their targets. She identified the most important battle that would happen in the coming weeks. The enemy was heading for Varith Prime. It was the oldest Confederation colony, established 11,000 years ago. 20 billion people lived there. If Varith Prime fell, Confederation morale would shatter completely. That was where humanity would make its stand. Cho sent a single message to Earth Command. Fleet proceeding to Varith Prime. Expect contact with enemy forces within 2 weeks. Will report results. Then she led her ships into the darkness between stars, toward the greatest battle any human had ever fought. The galaxy had ignored humanity's warnings. The galaxy had dismissed their weapons as primitive and obsolete. The galaxy had laughed at their insistence that kinetic accelerators were effective. Now the galaxy would learn the truth. Admiral. Cho looked at the stars through her bridge view screen. Somewhere out there, an enemy fleet was destroying everything in its path. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were dying because their leaders had been too proud to listen. She intended to change that. One way or another, Varith Prime was a world of ancient history and incredible beauty. The Confederation had established their first colony there 11,000 years before humans even discovered fire. Towering monuments rose toward the sky. Libraries held knowledge gathered across millennia. 20 billion inhabitants called it home, Varith. Prime was also directly in the path of the enemy advance. The Confederation assembled the largest fleet in their entire history to defend this world. 800 warships gathered in orbit, including 20 massive dreadnoughts. Each dreadnought was several kilometers long, bristling with plasma weapons and protected by the most advanced shields ever created. High Admiral Vexter himself commanded the defense from his flagship, the Unbreakable Will. Species unknown, 117. Arrived with 400 vessels. The battle began at extreme range. Confederation weapons reached out across millions of kilometers. Plasma lances and quantum disruptors splashed against enemy shields over and over again. The enemy ships kept coming, moving steadily forward, completely ignoring the barrage. At optimal firing range, they returned fire. Confederation ships died faster than anyone could count. Dreadnoughts that had taken decades to build were gutted in seconds. Cruisers exploded into fireballs. The defensive formation fell apart as captains broke ranks. Desperate to escape the killing field, High Admiral Vexter watched his fleet being destroyed. 300 ships gone in the first 10 minutes. 400 gone in the first 20. His most powerful weapons were doing nothing to the enemy. All remaining vessels, fall back to planetary orbit, he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. We will make our final stand, defending the planetary shields. Everyone knew it was a useless gesture. The planetary shields would fail, just like the ship shields had failed. 20 billion people would die. The Confederation would never recover from this loss. Then new contacts appeared on sensors too. 138 vessels emerged from hyperspace behind the enemy fleet. Their design was crude compared to Confederation standards. Their power readings were modest, but their weapon signatures were unmistakable. Human ships, whispered Vexter, this tactical officer in disbelief. They are deploying for combat, Admiral Cho's voice came through the open communication channel. Confederation fleet. This is United Earth Fleet Admiral Patricia Cho. Maintain your defensive positions. We will handle the enemy force. The enemy commander apparently decided the human fleet was not worth worrying about. They continued their advance toward Varith Prime without changing course. Admiral Cho gave the order. Fire at will. 238 ships fired their railgun batteries at the same moment. Over 1,000 tungsten projectiles, each moving at 31% of the speed of light, crossed the gap to the enemy fleet in under 2 seconds. The enemy shields were advanced. Far more advanced than anything the Confederation had. But they had been designed to stop energy weapons because every species in known space used energy weapons. No one used kinetic accelerators anymore. No one except humanity. 84 enemy vessels died in the first wave. Their shields held for a tiny fraction of a second before being overwhelmed by pure kinetic force. Hulls crumpled like paper. Reactors exploded. Ships that had destroyed hundreds of Confederation vessels simply stopped existing. The enemy fleet turned to face this new threat. Admiral Cho smiled grimly. Now they are paying attention. The enemy accelerated toward the human ships, their own railguns charging. They fired a massive wave of projectiles, hundreds of metal slugs streaking toward Cho's vessels. Evasive maneuvers, Cho ordered calmly. Point defense systems active. Human ships were smaller and faster than the enemy vessels. They had also spent years training for exactly this kind of battle. Ships twisted and rolled through space, presenting the smallest possible targets. Point defense railguns tracked incoming projectiles and fired precisely timed shots to deflect or destroy them. The enemy volley did cause damage. 12 human ships were hit. 3 were destroyed completely. But it was not the massacre the enemy had expected. Then the humans fired again. The battle raged for 6 hours. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. 2 fleets armed with kinetic weapons hammered each other at ranges and speeds that seemed impossible. Ships died on both sides, explosions lighting up the darkness of space. But the exchange rate favored humanity. Human crews were better trained. They had spent years practicing for this exact situation. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Human targeting systems were more accurate. And humans had something the enemy had never faced before: experience fighting against kinetic weapons by the 4th hour. The enemy was retreating. By the 5th hour, it was a complete rout. By the 6th hour, enemy fleet had been reduced to 47 vessels running away at maximum speed. Admiral Cho ordered pursuit. Her ships were faster. None of the enemy would escape. When the battle ended, she looked across the field of debris and wreckage. 91 human ships had been destroyed. Over 1,000 crew members were dead. It was the most costly battle in human history. But every single enemy ship was gone, destroyed or captured. The first real defeat these unknown attackers had ever suffered. "Hi, Admiral Vexter." S' voice came through the communication channel. He sounded like a different person than before. Quiet, humble, broken. Fleet Admiral Cho, on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I thank you. Cho's reply was equally quiet. You are welcome. Admiral. Now perhaps we can discuss those warnings you have been ignoring for the past 15 years. There was a long silence before Vexter spoke again. Yes, I believe we can. And I believe we must. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity had done what the entire Confederation could not. A fleet of primitive ships with primitive weapons had destroyed an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. The Council convened an emergency session. This time, no one dismissed human technology as obsolete. This time, no one laughed at kinetic weapons. This time, everyone listened. Dr. Martinez addressed the Council. We tried to warn you. For 15 years, we tried to explain the mathematics. Kinetic energy at relativistic speeds cannot be stopped by energy shields. You refused to believe us because we were young and primitive. She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of delegates who would not meet her eyes. 20 billion people on Vareth Prime are alive today because we did not give up. We kept building our railguns even when you mocked us. We kept training our crews even when you dismissed us. We were ready when you needed us. What do you want from us? Asked Vethanok. His voice had lost all its former arrogance. We want you to listen, Martinez replied. Not just today, but always. The next warning might not come from us. It might come from a species even younger and more primitive than humanity. Listen to them anyway, because the universe does not care about pride or tradition. The universe only cares about physics. The Council voted unanimously to form a combined fleet. Human officers would train Confederation crews in kinetic warfare. Human engineers would help redesign shields to resist physical impacts. Human ships would lead the counterattack. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the galaxy had hope. Admiral Cho stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching repair crews swarm over her damaged ships. They had won this battle, but there would be more battles ahead. The enemy was wounded but not destroyed. Still, something had changed. The The galaxy had finally learned to listen, and that might make all the difference. The war against Species Unknown 117 lasted 3 more years after the Battle of Varith Prime. It was a brutal conflict that stretched across hundreds of star systems and claimed millions of lives, but it was also a war that the galaxy was finally winning. Humanity led the combined fleet. Their railgun technology was shared freely with any species willing to learn. Confederation scientists, finally accepting the mathematics they had denied for so long, worked alongside human engineers to improve everything. New shields were developed that could actually resist kinetic impacts. New tactics were created that used both energy and kinetic weapons together. The enemy, eventually identified through captured records as the Vreth Dominion from a distant galaxy, was driven back system by system. Their original advantage had been their kinetic weapons and the galaxy's stubborn refusal to develop counters. Once that advantage disappeared, they were simply another enemy that could be fought and defeated. Admiral Patricia Cho commanded the final campaign. Her fleet had grown from the original 238 human ships to over 2,000 vessels from 100 different species. Corellians and Vorthani fought alongside humans. Former rivals became brothers in arms. The galaxy had finally united against a common threat. The final battle took place at the Vreth Dominion's forward staging base, a massive station floating in the empty void between galaxies. Intelligence reports indicated this was where the enemy had launched their invasion from. Destroying it would cut them off from reinforcements and end the war. Admiral Cho commanded from the bridge of the Resolute, the newest and most powerful human vessel ever built. She was 63 years old now. Her hair had turned gray. Lines of stress and responsibility marked her face, but her eyes were as sharp and determined as they had been 15 years earlier when she first started warning the galaxy about kinetic weapons. All ships. She transmitted to the combined fleet, "This ends today. Fire at will." The battle was fierce but short. The Vreth Dominion had never recovered from their losses at Varith Prime. Their fleet was a fraction of its former strength. Their morale had been shattered by years of defeats and retreats. They fought with the desperation of those who know they have already lost, and they died with the inevitability of mathematics. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, silence fell across the fleet. Then, slowly, cheering began. It started on one ship and spread to another, then another, until the communication channels were filled with the joyful sounds of 100 different species celebrating together. Relief and gratitude washed across the stars. The war was over. The galaxy had survived. The Confederation Council convened 1 month later to formally recognize the end of the conflict. But this meeting was different from all the ones that came before. The chamber had been redesigned. The seating arrangement had been changed. Humanity no longer sat in the small observer section at the back. Ambassador Martinez stood at the central podium, addressing hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy. 15 years ago, we warned you about kinetic weapons. We were dismissed as primitives who did not understand proper technology. We were told that energy weapons and shields were the peak of military development. We were ignored and mocked. She paused, letting the silence stretch through the chamber. Billions died because of that arrogance. Entire worlds were destroyed. Species that had existed for thousands of years were nearly wiped out. All because you were too proud to listen to a young species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Several delegates looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Others sat with their heads bowed in shame. Today, we do not ask for apologies. We do not ask for special treatment. We ask only that you remember. Remember that the universe does not care about age or tradition or pride. Physics is physics. Reality is reality. And sometimes, the youngest voice in the room is the one most worth hearing. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership in the Confederation. Not the provisional membership that had been discussed 15 years earlier, but complete and equal status. More importantly, the charter was changed to ensure that no species would ever again be dismissed because of their age or development level. Warnings would be heard. Concerns would be investigated. Pride would never again blind the galaxy to threats. Admiral Cho attended the ceremony through a holographic link from the Resolute. She was retiring soon, her duties to be passed to a new generation of officers. When asked to speak, she kept her words simple. "We did not want to be right," she said. "We would have been happy to learn that our weapons were useless. We would have been happy to discover that shields really could stop anything. But reality does not negotiate. When you ignore reality's warnings, reality does not care about your feelings." She paused, looking at the assembled delegates. "Learn from this. The next warning might not come from us. It might come from a species that looks even more primitive, even more dismissible. Listen to them anyway. Test their claims. Examine their evidence. Because in this universe, the price of denial is always paid in lives." The galaxy listened. For the first time in 12,000 years of Confederation history, they truly listened to what a young species had to say. And when the next warning came, decades later, from a species that had just discovered how to make fire, the Confederation sent scientists to investigate instead of diplomats to dismiss. They found that the young species had noticed something in their night sky, a pattern in the stars that suggested another threat was approaching from yet another direction. The species could not build ships or weapons. They could barely survive on their own harsh world, but they could observe and they could think. And they had noticed something everyone else had missed. The Confederation took their warning seriously. They investigated. They prepared. And when the new threat arrived, they were ready. Humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson written in blood and fire. Pride was dangerous. Dismissal was deadly. The universe was full of surprises. And the youngest voice might have the most important message. Admiral. Patricia Cho died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94. Surrounded by her family on Earth, she was given a state funeral attended by representatives from 300 species. Her epitaph was simple. She warned us. We listened. The galaxy survived. It was enough. It was everything. The stars continued to shine in the darkness, as they always had. But now they shone on a galaxy that had learned to pay attention, to question its assumptions, and to never again ignore. A warning simply because it came from an unexpected source. Humanity had given the galaxy more than railguns. They had given it humility, and that gift would save countless lives in the centuries to come.